Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited to have you all here. Please, if you are new to this channel and you are yet to subscribe, kindly do so by clicking on the subscription button, and if you have already done so, thank you so much and I'm really grateful. Now in today's tutorial, we'll be learning how to make this trending Canadian smoking turban cap design. Initially, Canadian smoking has always been used in making of throw pillows. However, in recent times, the design has evolved and it has been used in designing clothes as well as headwears. Now, for this tutorial, the materials to use include scuba fabric for the turban base, satin fabric for the smoking design, needing a plain piece of paper to draw out your pattern, needing a matching color of thread and needle, needing either foam, fiber or piece of fabric to fill in the smoke design. You also be needing accessories for embellishment such as appliques, stones and so on. You also be needing gum, either your UAG gum or your candle gum, as well as your tailor's chalk, your scissors and your measuring tape. Okay, having known all that, let's now move into the tutorial properly. For this tutorial, the design that we are working on is divided into two parts. First and foremost, we have our turban cap, which is the base, and then the design, which is the Canadian smoking design. Okay, at this point, first ensure you have your turban cap ready, and I've already done mine before now. Now you can make any turban cap of your choice as the base. However, what I have here is the gathered or pleated turban cap. This has already been previously taught in one of our previous tutorials on our YouTube channel. I'll be leaving the link to the video on the description box. Please check through the description box for the link to access the video for this particular design of turban cap. So this is it. Now I made this with my scuba fabric and I'm going to set this aside. Now coming down to the design itself, I'm going to be working with satin fabric, okay, and I have my satin fabric here. Now I'll be stating the measurements for the fabric. I'm going to be using 16.5 inches by 23.5 inches. Now 16.5 inches is going to be the width, while 23.5 inches is going to be the length, which is the head circumference. So from here to here is 23.5 inches, and from here to here should be your 16.5 inches. Now that is for the satin fabric, which you'll be using for the Canadian smoking design. Now there are different patterns of Canadian smoking. Each design is unique on its own depending on the kind or the pattern of smoking design that is used. Okay, so today we're going to be doing a wave and arrow design together, and then first and foremost we'll be drawing out the pattern that we're going to be using. So I have my piece of paper here. This piece of paper is going to be serving as my fabric for illustration sake. So like I said, this piece of paper will be serving as my fabric for illustration sake. So whatever I'm going to be doing on this piece of paper, I'll have to transfer it to my fabric later on. Now, so I have my fabric here, or my piece of paper here, and like I said earlier, the measurement for this piece of fabric is 23.5 inches for the length by 16.5 inches for the width. So this is it. This is my width, 16.5 inches, and this is my length, 23.5 inches. Now this is what I'm going to be doing again. On all four edges, I'm going to be marking out 1.5 inches, and then I'll take out the measurement and mark it out. This is going to serve as the edge or the margin on my fabric. So I'll get my measuring tape. And then measure out 1.5 inches round the edges. So that's what I'm just going to do. Okay, at this point I'm done drawing out my margin. Like I said, this is my piece of fabric, 16.5 by 23.5, and then from this point down to this point is 1.5 inches, from here to here is 1.5 inches, from this line to the end 1.5 inches, and from this line also to the end is another 1.5 inches. So you come in by 1.5 inches round the edges. Now that is it for that. Having done that, we'll now move on to making our grid lines. Now this is the basis of every Canadian smoking design. You first have to draw the grid lines before proceeding with drawing any other pattern that you want to work with. So to do that, you have to ensure that the grid lines, that is the boxes you are going to be creating on your piece of paper, are all equal. Yes, they all have to be equal. So for this tutorial I'm going to be working with 1 inch. So I'll get my, either you make use of your measuring tape or you make use of your ruler. So on my ruler I'm going to be marking out 1 inch. At this point I'm done drawing my grid lines, and this is the basics for every Canadian smoking design. You first have to draw your grid lines before you draw your pattern, your Canadian smoking pattern, and before you stitch. Now please ensure that the boxes or the grid lines that you have drawn are all equal, and I said we're using 1 inch by 1 inch. Yes, so each box is 1 inch wide. So 1 inch is equivalent to 2 cm. So it's either you use 1 inch or you use 2 cm. That is it. So all boxes should be equal. And then as soon as I'm done, this is what I have gotten. Now, like I said earlier, the pattern that we are working, or the design we are working on, comprises of 2 different patterns: the wave and the arrow design. So it's more like a 2-in-1 smoking pattern. Now to start with our design, I have my first box here, and I'm going to be starting from here. So I'll get my ruler and I'm going to be drawing it this way. Now I will skip the next box. I'll skip the next box. I'll skip the next box. I'll skip the next box. And then I'll skip the next box. So this is what I get for the first line. Now for the second line, I'm going to be making use of 2 boxes, because now I'm going to be drawing out the arrow pattern. Now these are 2 boxes. I'm going to skip these first 2 boxes here, and coming down to the next 2 boxes, this is what I'll be doing. Now I will skip the next 2 boxes. I will skip the next 2 boxes also. And then I will skip the next 2 boxes. I'll skip the next 2 boxes. So this is it. Now coming over to the next line, I'm going to be drawing the same single pattern similar to this, but in opposite direction. Now this is what I mean. I'm starting from the first box, and then you can see that this slant here, it's opposite in direction to this other one here. So I'll continue like this to the end, skipping 1 box each. So I'll skip this box, I'll skip this box, I'll skip the next box, and I'll skip the next box, and I'm skipping the next box, and then this is it. Now I'm going to continue, and this time around we'll be creating our arrow pattern again using 2 boxes, but then it's going to be in the opposite direction. Now I'll skip these first 2 boxes and come in here my arrow pattern is going to be coming like this. You can see that it's in opposite direction of what I have here at first. Skip the next two boxes. 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 And then this is what I get. Now for the last part, I'm going to be making the single slat pattern, which is the wave pattern, but it's going to also go in the other direction like we started initially with. So this is it. It's coming this way now, starting from the first box. Skip one, skip the next box, skip the next box, skip the next box, skip the next box, and then finally this is what we get. So let me start by giving a last minute explanation again. The length of our fabric is 23.5 inches and the width 16.5 inches. Now measure out 1.5 inches round the edge of your fabric. That is this space that we have here. This is going to serve as the margin we'll be using to stitch. And then coming down to the middle of the work where we have the grid line or the boxes, the interval or the difference between each box is 1 inch. So this is 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, and just like that. And then we have drawn our pattern. You can see we have two different patterns. We have this single pattern, which is the wave. We have these two patterns, which these two in one pattern, which is the arrow design. Now you can see that this is opposite of this and this is opposite of this. This arrow is facing upwards and this other arrow is facing downwards. Please take note of it. And then every single line starts from the top of your fabric and then you skip one box in between. While coming lengthwise, you are skipping two boxes, then your line, your single line, skip two boxes, then your single line. So once you are able to take note of this difference, it will not be difficult for you to work on. So this is it. And then exactly what I have here, or exactly what I've been explained here on this piece of paper, is exactly what we're going to be doing on our piece of fabric. So we have to now get our piece of fabric, make your margins, draw your grid lines, and then draw your pattern on it. Then we'll proceed with stitching. Right here I have my piece of fabric, although it's a bit wider than my phone camera, but then take note of this edge, take note of this edge, take note of this edge, and then also take note of this edge. Now that's the 1.5 inches round. Then coming over to the middle, see I've made my grid lines. And remember that each box must be uniform, 1 inch difference. Now I'm going to proceed with marking out my pattern on it. So this is the pattern that we're going to be using. And then coming over to this place, starting from the first box. Okay, it's a bit faint, so this is it. And then I'm going to be following this pattern here. You draw one, you skip one, you draw one, you skip one, and then you make another line. Okay, to enable us get it better, I had to change my color of chalk. So this is it. After drawing this, you skip one line and then you draw the next one, you skip another line and then draw the next one. So this is it. I've gotten to the end. Now coming over to this part, we're making use of these two. So we have to skip the first two boxes and then so this is it. Skip the next two boxes. Remember, this is the pattern that we're working with, so I'll just continue. And then this is done. Then coming over to this part, I'm going to be repeating this third line, this one here, where my line has to go in the opposite direction of what I started with. And then this is it. So if you look at this piece of paper carefully, you will see that this first line has been drawn here, this second line has been drawn here, and then this third line has been drawn here. So what I'm going to continue with is these two, and then when I get to this end, which is also this, I'll continue repeating this, and then when I get here, remember that this line is the same thing with this line. I just have to repeat this two again. So I'm just going to continue till I've covered my entire fabric with my pattern. So I'll do that off camera, and as soon as I'm done, I'll get back for us to continue. Okay, I'm all done, and then this is my piece of fabric, and as you can see, I've made my markings to the end. I started from this end down to this end, and this is it, my 23 by 16 inches. So as soon as we're done with making our grid lines and then placing our pattern on it, we are going to be stitching. So for that, we'll be needing a matching color of thread and needle. Now coming down to stitching, I have my needle and thread here, and then this is my piece of fabric. So this is the single line. Now what I'll do is I'm starting from this edge. I'm going to be sewing this edge and then sewing this edge together. So I'll pass my needle and thread from here, and then take it down to this point here, this way, and then hold it down like this, and then stitch it through. Okay, your thread must have been tied at the other end. So as soon as that is done, I'm going to get my thread and I'll cut it off. And then coming down to the second part, I'm going to stitch here again, still on the same line to this part here. So I'll pass my needle and thread from this point, and then take it down to this tip here, and then place it where these two ends should meet like this, and I'm going to be stitching it using my thread. Ensure that your thread has been knotted at the end. So I'll continue doing this. So this is it, the first two stitches. I have it here, and then this is the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch down to this end of camera to complete it, and I'll get back to show us how it looks like. At this point, I'm done stitching this first line, that's the single line, and then coming over to this part, I'm going to be stitching this part that has the arrow design. Now this is what you are going to do. First, ensure that you have your thread knotted at the end. Now to continue, pick up your fabric and then observe that it has 3 points. 1, 2, 3. So this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm starting from this end here. So I'm starting from this end here. And then to this end here. And then I'm taking it to the top here where both ends meet. And I'm just going to tie everything together at this point. And I'm going to cut off my thread. So this is it. The first one has been done. Now coming over again, we have another one here. So what I'll do is I'll get my needle, starting from this end, coming down to this end here. I hope you can see the arrow shape. Then coming down to the top, the uppermost part here, that's the tip. And then I'm just going to knot this. And after knotting, I'll cut off my excess thread, and then that is that. So I'm going to take it again. Now this is another design, the next design, and then I'm starting from this point down to this end, and then over to the tip. And then I'm just going to knot it at this end here. So for other designs down the same line, I'm just going to follow the same pattern of stitching and stitch it together. Right here is my work, and I'm done stitching the first single line and the next 2 arrow line, and then turning over to this other side. This is what I have now. This is where I have my arrow design. It's coming into place, but because I'm not done tacking, you may not really get it. So this is how it looks like. Now we're done with that. Coming over to the next line, that is this slant side, which is on the opposite side. Tacking it is the same thing with what we did initially for the first box. However, I'm going to repeat this. So this point, pass your needle and thread through this point, then come over to the top again, pass it through, place it this way, and then tack it together. And as soon as you are done tacking, you have secured it in place, you can cut off the excess thread. Now move on to the next box, and that is this, and repeat the same thing. So this is it, and then I have to continue tacking the same way till I get to the end. So at this point I'm done tacking. I followed the same pattern and I've stitched to the end, and then this is my work in progress. Now Coming over to this other side where we have the arrow design, but this time around it's the shape is coming downwards. I'm going to also get my needle and thread, and then starting from this edge, I'm going to pass it through this edge and then pass it through this end here, this downwards part, and I'm going to be knotting it just like we did earlier. And then that is that. To continue is the same thing. Get the second pattern, which is this here, and then I'm going to pass my needle and thread from this end down to this end here, and then coming over to this downward part here where both patterns meet. And I'm going to be knotting it together. So for others that I have in the same pattern, I'm going to be following the same procedure to stitch all through. So this is it, and I've done it to the end, and I'm going to flip this over to this other side to show us how it looks like. So I have 2 arrow lines and then 2 wave lines. So this is it. Now this is just how it is sewn, and then any other pattern that is left on the piece of fabric will follow the same sewing pattern. Like coming over to this part now, you see the next line to be sewn. It's the same thing with what we started with. You pass your needle, start your needle from this end, pass it to this end, and then join both together, then stitch it. That is how you do to the end. Coming over to this arrow design here, starting from this point, pass your needle and thread, come over to this side, pass your needle and thread, pass your needle and thread through this tip, and then knot it together, and then that is it for that. So this is how you continue till you get to the end of the fabric. Right now I'm going to go back and then stitch in order to shorten the length of the video. So after stitching, I'll get back to show us the finished or the final outlook. Okay, right before me I have my piece of fabric which has been smoked. This is the wrong view, and then this is the fine view. You can see our arrow design in opposite direction and the wave designs in between. Now at this point I'm going to take the measurement of my fabric because the fabric has shrinked in size. It's now much more smaller than what it was initially. So for the length, right now I'm having 16 inches as opposed to the initial 23.5 inches. Right now what I'm having is 16 inches. For the width, I'm having about 7 inches, which initially was 16.5 inches. So what I'm having right now is 16 by 7 inches. Now I'm going to set this aside, and then in order to finish our work, we'll be needing a second piece of fabric. Now this is going to be a plain fabric. The essence of measuring our already smoked fabric is to enable us have an idea of the measurement for this second piece of fabric. Now for this second piece of fabric, the length is 16 inches while the width is 5.5 inches. So what I have before me is 16 by 5.5 inches. Now I'm going to get my smoked fabric and I'm going to be joining these two together. So first, place your smoked fabric. The fine side should be facing you while the wrong side should be facing the working table, and then get your second piece of plain fabric and then place on it this way. Now the way this second piece of fabric is, the wrong side is facing me while the fine side is facing the fine side of my smoked fabric. So we are placing both pieces of fabric together, fine side facing fine side. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place this on my sewing machine and I'm going to sew. Okay, I will sew from one end to the other. I will sew this end, I will also sew this end, that is, I'm stitching the 4 edges close, but then along one edge I'm going to leave a few inches open. Okay, I'll leave about 3 inches open, and then we'll be using it to fill in our fabric when we get there. You understand what I mean better? So right now I'm going to sew my fabric, and after sewing I'll get back. I have my piece of fabric, and this is the wrong side, this is the other side. As you can see, I've sewn round my fabric, and along one end I have this open space, okay, this open allowance here, and this is where I'm going to be stuffing in my fabric with my foam or fiber in order to fill it up. So this is how it looks like after stitching. So what I will do next is to turn my fabric inside out, and then after turning my fabric inside out, this is how it looks like. This is the front view, and then this is the back view. This is the open end. So this is what I get. What we're going to be doing is that we're going to be filling our fabric, and now to do that we'll be needing either fiber or foam. Now I have my fiber here. This is how it looks like. It is soft in texture, and hair, it's hairy, soft in texture, and white in color. It is majorly or mostly used by carpenters, and then you can get it from them. And then in place of fiber, I can as well get piece of foam. Okay, and I also have piece of foam here. This is just your normal foam in pieces, and then it can also be gotten from those who sell carpentry materials. Now in place of either of these, you can make use of piece of fabric. So as a fashion designer or headwear designer, from your previous project, you should have a lot of leftover piece of fabric. You can as well make use of that to fill in your fabric, depending on what you prefer. But then I think the fiber or the foam looks more presentable than that. However, it depends on your choice. So I'm going to get my fabric, and then to the end that is opening, if I'm using my foam, all I have to do is to start placing my foam inside my fabric. Okay, and then I'll take it down to the end. If I'm using my fiber, I'll get as many fiber that I want to use and start placing it inside my fabric. Okay, as soon as it's inside, I'll take it down to the end, then get another one and place it in that order until I've filled up the entire fabric with my fiber or my foam or my piece of fabric. Right now I have my piece of fabric before me, and I'm done filling it in with either my fiber or my foam, and this is the front view while this is the back view. Okay, and please don't forget to close down this edge. So I'm going to get my needle and thread, or I can also place it on my sewing machine and then stitch this end close. At this point I'm done, and I've stitched down this end. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Right now I'm going to get my turban cap, and I'm going to get my smoking design. I'm going to be placing this on my cap. Okay, and I'm going to be stitching it down. First and foremost, I have to place this on my dummy head to get the actual fitting, and after doing that, I'll use my pins to hold it in place so that it can guide me on how to make my sewing stitch. That's how to stitch both the smoking design down to the turban base. Right here I have my smoking design pinned down to my turban cap. Okay, I don't know if you can see the point where I pinned it. What I did before now was to place my turban cap on my dummy head, then place my smoked design on it to get the actual fitting, to know where it should start from and where it should end and how it looks like. Then I used my pins to hold it down in place. Thereafter, we have two options. We can either stitch this design down to the cap, or to join both together we make use of gum. That will require our candle gum and glue gun. Okay, now this is the candle gum and glue gun. all you have to do is to plug it to the source of power supply, and then as soon as it's hot, then you apply your gum at the back and then glue it down to your turban cap. That is one option, which is very easy and will not take a whole lot of time. It only requires that you be patient and you be careful to avoid gum stains. Now, coming down to the second option, which involves the use of a needle and thread to stitch down both together. So I have my needle and thread here, and I have my design before me. This is how we are going to be doing it. I'm going to pass my needle and thread from inside the cap and then come out from one edge, that's at one edge of the design, this way, and then my needle and thread is out. Now, to continue, this is what I'm going to do. I want to make my stitch invisible so that it's not visible inside my turban cap. Now, this is how it is done. Since my needle and thread is coming out already, I'm going to pass my thread inside, that is my needle, inside my satin fabric. Okay, that's to say that big stitches, I'll be making the big stitches inside the fabric, while outside, that is at the back of my turban cap, I'll just be seeing tiny stitches. So now watch, I'm passing my needle and thread inside the satin fabric, as you can see. Okay, I started from this end and then see where my needle is coming out from. You can see the distance, so I'm bringing it out and then I'm going to take it back into the turban cap. And it's out, my thread is out. Now I'm going to secure it by doing it once more. So this is it now. I'm done stitching this end. To continue, I'll pass my needle and thread inside the satin fabric again, come out from the next spot where I want to continue from, and then I'm going to now stitch it down to the cap. So I'll pass my needle and thread inside down to the back of the cap, and then it's out. As soon as it's out, I'll take my needle and thread back again up to the satin fabric, and then that is it for that. Now I'll pass my thread again inside the satin fabric and then come out from the next point where I want to continue from. And as soon as my thread is out, I'm going to be tacking it down to the cap. And then this is it. So I'll continue in the same order that I've been following till I've completely stitched both the front and the back of the design down to the cap. So my thread is out of the satin fabric. I'll take it back inside the satin fabric again and then come out from the next point where I want to continue from. And then tack it down to the cap. Then as soon as it's coming out from the cap, I'll take it back and then it's out from the satin fabric. So that is how it's done. So now look at what I was trying to explain initially. If you look at the back of my cap, you just see these tiny dots, depending on how you space your work. Okay, if you want to give much more bigger spaces, then you have to tack it 2 to 3 times before passing onto the next part. Then for the front, you won't see any stitches on the satin fabric. So this is how it is. Now I'm going to stitch all through and then get back to show us the finished look. Right here I'm done tacking, and this is my work. This is how it looks like. Now to give these finishing touches, I'm going to get my applique, which I have here. Okay, so this is an applique. In place of an applique, you can use trimmings, you can use stones for embellishment, whatever you prefer. And then I'm going to get gum. I have my UAG gum here, and of course you can use your candle gum and glue gun for this. I'm going to be applying this on my applique, and then I'm going to be gluing this down to the other side of my turban cap where there is no design whatsoever. So it's going to come and stay this way as a form of embellishment. As soon as that is done, so this is how it looks like, and this is this other side. Now for this other part, I can get gum and then get stones and apply gum and place on it. Okay, it depends on my preference. So for this tutorial, this is all that there is to it. Okay, right here, this is the finished look of my design while placed on my dummy head. As you can see, a smoking design on one side and I embellished design on the other part. So I'm going to turn this over to the side. This is it, and then this is how the back looks like. So this is it. Thank you so much for watching, and with this we have come to the end of this tutorial. Please, if you like this video, do well to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section, and feel free to share. And if you are yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, kindly do so by clicking on the subscription button and also on the bell icon to enable you get notifications on all other tutorials that will be uploaded. And if there are any other tutorial which you would like us to have on our YouTube channel, do well to let us know.